Hey, what's up? What's up? It's your girl Neek, and you're tuned in to Neek while on vacation. Okay, this is Neek at Night Vacation Edition. So, anyways, I wanted to get into some tea while I wait to get my food. Okay, I wanted to bring y'all the juice, bring y'all some of the stories that I have not been able to get to y'all while I was getting myself together for this vacation. Now, I want to talk about this whole new lawsuit with Jamie Foxx. Now, basically, what happened was there was this window of opportunity for people in New York to be able to sue people who they felt like wronged them, as far as, snatching and taking the hanky panky when they wasn't supposed to, or violating them in some type of way. So basically, what they enacted after the Me Too movement was this act called the Survivors Act. And it was from November of last year to November of this year, where victims of people who had something happen to them where the statute of limitations kind of ran out, they were able to file a lawsuit and try to get justice. So, what we saw happening was at the crunch time where it was about to expire, everybody started filing in their lawsuits before the deadline. And one of the people who caught a stray was Jamie Foxx. So, she's basically saying that she was fondled, he put his hands in her pants, put his hands on her boobs, and it forever traumatized her for the rest of her life, and she's feeling some type of way about it. So I'm gonna get into some of the documents, and then I'm going to have a lawyer who I had come on before basically break down what is going on in legal terms. Okay, so let me get into the documents. They basically start at line 36. That's kind of when all of the details are pretty much there. Okay, so on line 36, it says, on or about August 26, 2015, at approximately 11 p.m., the plaintiff and a friend arrived at 21st 9th Avenue for the purpose of getting seats at the rooftop lounge and bar. Upon being seated, the plaintiff noticed that the defendant, Mark Birnbaum, was seated one table away having drinks with the defendant, Eric Marlon Bishop, aka Jamie Foxx. So she's saying that one of the defendants is this Mark Birnbaum guy, and the other defendant is Jamie Foxx. Now, in the next line, it says that not long after being seated, the plaintiff and her friend observed a large crowd growing around the defendants Birnbaum and Fox's table. As a result, the defendants John slash Jane. So in this lawsuit, John Doe is one of his security guards. So I'm guessing she's basically saying that their personal security, Jamie Foxx personal security, is the one who did the following. So it says, as a result, defendants John slash Jane does 1 to 10 began moving the crowd of patrons away, including nearly all of the patrons seated at tables near Birnbaum and Fox. So this says after they got seated down, they started to observe there was a large crowd around Jamie Foxx, and this Jane slash John Doe, who I believe is Jamie Foxx's security guard, started to move all of these people away from his table and get them out of there. So it says, despite them being the only two remaining in the area, the plaintiff and her friend were never asked to move from their table located beside Birnbaum and Fox's table. At some point near approximately 1 a.m. on August 27, 2015, after many patrons had left the area, the plaintiff stood up from the table, walked over to the defendant Fox, and asked if he would take a picture with her. And the plaintiff Fox stated, "Sure, baby, anything for you," and walked to the plaintiff's table. Several photographs were taken. While taking photographs, the plaintiff observed that Fox seemed intoxicated. At one point, Fox roughly grabbed the plaintiff's phone out of her hand and took additional photographs. Fox then made several comments to the plaintiff, including, "Wow, you have that supermodel body. You smell so good, and you look like Nikki." When the plaintiff asked, "Who's Nikki?" Fox replied, "Gabrielle Union," and then proceeded to grab the plaintiff by her arm and pulled her to the back area of the rooftop. Once in a more secluded area, Fox placed both of his hands on the plaintiff's waist, moved them under the plaintiff's crop top, and began rubbing her chest area up, okay? It says the plaintiff was caught off guard and attempted to step away from Fox. The plaintiff noticed that the defendant, John Doe, a security guard, one of the defendants some distance away, who, wait, let me read that part over. It said plaintiff noticed the defendant, John Doe, a security guard of one of the defendants some distance away, who saw what was happening but walked further away. Fox proceeded to slide his hands into the plaintiff's pants and put his fingers on and in the plaintiff's woohaa, okay, in her Koopa stinker back in the back. So in her, the one in the pink and the one that stinks. She said he put it in both of those. Okay, he put his hand there. And she said, as this was happening, the plaintiff's friend walked over looking for her. And it says that Fox stopped touching the plaintiff and walked over to where the defendant, John Doe, a security guard, was standing. That no negligence or intentional acts on the part of the plaintiff was caused or contributed to the said heinous touching and sexual assault of the plaintiff. That by reason of the foregoing, the plaintiff was injured, was rendered sick, sore, lame, and disabled. Okay, so she said that by him putting, his hands in the pinker and the stinker, that she was left disabled. She was left with all of this trauma from this encounter. So she is saying that, she was left sick. She was rendered sick, sore, lame, and disabled, and was caused to undergo medical treatment and advice, was unable to pursue her usual and regular activities, was caused to undergo great conscious pain and suffering, continues to undergo such, and will permanently be affected by the injuries and emotional distress she incurred as a result of this touching. Okay, this touching in her orifices. It says this was abuse, assault, and battery, and that as a result of the heinous acts, negligence, and gross negligence of the defendants, as aforesaid, the plaintiff suffered and continues to suffer severe emotional distress and anxiety, humiliation, embarrassment, post traumatic stress disorder, and other physical and emotional damages. The plaintiff is entitled to recover damages from the defendant in an amount that exceeds the monetary limit of all lower courts that would have jurisdiction over this matter, plus punitive damages. This cause of action falls within one or more of the examples set forth, etc., etc. So this is basically what she's saying. She's saying that he committed this heinous act and they want to seek money for it. Now, like I said, I had an attorney come on and kind of break down some of the questions that I had about this lawsuit and some of the things that the audience might want answered. So let's give a big round of applause. Okay, fake round, fake clap, 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 clap it up for our special guest. All right, so our guest that we're having on is a lawyer in New York City, and he is very familiar with a lot of the law that is happening in New York in these lawsuits and things like that. He knows the language. So I wanted to just pry and ask him a couple questions. He also is a YouTuber himself, and he breaks down some of these court cases over on his YouTube channel. So be sure to go on over and subscribe to him as well. But let's have him on to answer some of these questions about this lawsuit.
In New York, what they did is they enacted this law that extended the Adult Survivors Act, rather the statute of limitations, which became called the Adult Survivors Act, and allowed people to file a lawsuit within a certain period of time after the passing of that law. And that period of time expired just a couple of days ago, right? And so all these lawsuits, the Diddy lawsuit, the new Diddy lawsuits, Axl Rose and Cuba Gooding Jr., and a few of them that were filed, I think 2,500 was the last number I heard as it relates to these lawsuits.
2,500 lawsuits were filed?
My understanding, and this isn't verified, is that 2,500 Adult Survivors Act lawsuits were filed in the past few days. Right.
Wow.
Because that time frame was closing, and so these victims needed somewhere to go to air their complaints, and in a court of law, you're governed by the statute of limitations. And so that's what happened here. The allegations here are basically that the woman suing had claimed that she was at a restaurant in New York where she met Jamie Foxx at some point. He sexually assaulted her, and the folks in the restaurant did nothing to protect her, effectively walked away and avoided the situation, and she suffered damages as a result. Again, a sexual assault lawsuit requiring, or at least requesting, certain damages to be paid.
So she must have some sort of document that states that she went to the hospital or something, I would assume.
Well, it depends on the specifics of the damages, right? So the complaint, it's permitted by law that the complaint be vague, right, in terms of the damages. As time passes in these cases, if she's going to claim medical treatment, damages of some sort, she's going to have to prove those. So she's going to have to produce the medical records, the psychiatric records, assuming they exist, things of that nature. They don't have to be specified here at this stage. They will have to be produced eventually, assuming the case doesn't get dismissed.
So hypothetically, if 2,500 lawsuits were indeed filed within this week recently, what would that look like on a court's calendar? Like, are we looking at these being litigated? Should they go to trial years down the line, or how do you perceive that will go?
Yeah, you know, in New York, it's not uncommon for very many lawsuits to be filed all at once, right? New York City has, I'm assuming, hundreds of lawsuits, if not more, filed every day. And so this isn't terribly uncommon. You know, this isn't a small town or a small city where you have fewer lawsuits filed. So I can't imagine it would backlog the system terribly too much. As for how the cases will go, as statistically speaking, a lot of them will settle. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll settle right away, like the P. Diddy one did with Cassie. That's rare that a case settles within a day. But statistically speaking, a case will settle in New York City. And so the majority of these cases, the large majority, will settle. I suppose some will go to trial. Perhaps some will get dismissed. So that's kind of where we are. At this particular point, at the initial stage of the case, any settlement is really a settlement for the purposes of getting rid of the case, not so much anything else, because it's so early, none of the evidence is being produced in a case like this. So that effort will have to be made once more evidence comes forward.
And in these types of cases, is there something going on in the background where it's like the evidence isn't made public, but maybe there's an incentive to show certain things to the defendant to get a quick settlement or not, that the public isn't made aware of?
Well, you know, the plaintiff that files the lawsuit is in charge of how the lawsuit is filed and what's included in that lawsuit. Obviously, if the plaintiff includes insufficient information, the lawsuit may be dismissed, and that's on the plaintiff and the lawyers to make those kinds of decisions, whether or not and how they're going to proceed, what evidence to include, what exhibits to include. As a general legal standard, you're not required to include terribly too much evidence in the initial filing. You're not required to include exhibits. You're certainly not required to include medical records. So that's really a strategic decision, right? How much do we put now as opposed to how much do we hold on to then maybe deploy later on? It's a strategic decision that lawyers and clients make every day, everywhere around the country.
Oh, okay. Have you looked over the new complaint against Diddy and Aaron Hall?
I have not, no.
Oh, okay. What about the one against his president, vice president?
Well, no, I haven't looked over too many of them. I looked over this Jamie Foxx lawsuit, but there were too many filed to get into all of them right away. So that may come with time.
So in this lawsuit, she's suing the restaurant, the security, and Jamie Foxx and the Beerman guy, or just Jamie Foxx and the restaurant?
No, it looks like Birnbaum is named. I don't know who that is. And some other entities, and nobody knows who those entities are, right? The way these restaurants operate is it's possible there may be various different companies involved in making a restaurant move forward, right? Whether or not those entities are foreign or domestic. right? And so she named all of those companies, as she should have, because she doesn't know exactly who owns what, and she doesn't want to leave anybody out because, again, in a case where you're pushed by a statute of limitations, you leave somebody out, you can bring them in later on. And so she named all of these defendants that, in good faith, her lawyers must have determined may be responsible here.
As the discovery phase happens and both sides submits their evidence, then at that time, we'll see who the security company is. If it makes it that far, we'll see what her evidence is once it gets to trial, right? That's when the evidence will come out. If it makes it that far.
It'll come out at discovery, which should take place relatively quickly here, once the conferences are scheduled with the court and so on and so forth. Generally speaking, discovery may be filed. It doesn't have to be filed. Generally, a party is only required to serve discovery on the other side, not necessarily file it, but some file it, and then that may come out here as well.
Thank you so much for coming on. I look forward to having you on to break down so many more of these cases, because every single hour, literally yesterday, there was a new lawsuit, a new lawsuit, a new lawsuit that was making its ways on the news. So there's going to be so much more to come that we haven't even realized that has been filed yet. So I look forward to having you on again. And thank you so much for coming on and speaking.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, guys, so that's all for this video. I hope that it was informative. I hope that you got some more, perspective on what was going on. And I want to know what you guys think about it. What do you think about her claims and her saying this rendered her sick, disabled, and all of the things And let me know what you think going forward, and we'll talk in the next video.